Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 17 in the book of Hebrews. We're starting chapter 5 today, and we're going to learn about a little bit more about the great high priest, which is Jesus. But then there's a subtext to this passage that we're going to read, and it's about the Father. It's about the Father's relationship to Jesus. So listen to that as we read the text. This is from Hebrews chapter 5. For verse 1, for every high priest chosen from among men, so he's going to compare and contrast human high priest to the high priest of Jesus. But listen for the Father. For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and the wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. That's about the human priest. Because of this, he's obligated to offer a sacrifice for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. And no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God. So, Christ did not exalt himself to be made high priest, but was appointed by him who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." He says in another place, "You are priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplication with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. The Father was able to save Jesus from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. So the Father heard that prayer. Verse 8, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. All right, so kind of a snarky title for this is, hey, you're going to need a better priest, and he's going to compare and contrast the human high priest to the great high priest, which is Jesus. And the human high priest, let's talk about him just for a second. He's chosen among men, and he is appointed to act on behalf of men in relationship to God. So he's going to offer gifts and sacrifices for sin, and he's going to help us with our standing with God. Now, the problem is he's beset with weakness, the human priest is. And it says the beset means that he's got his arms all the way around it. I just love that. That's what the Greek says, that he's beset with sin. He's beset with weakness. He's got his arms all the way around weakness. And therefore, he's got to offer a sacrifice for his own sins to make him sort of, temporarily, incompletely, inadequately able to offer these sacrifices for the people. And he's called by God, and his task is to help with the breach in the relationship between the Father and humanity. Okay, so let's talk about Christ, because this passage just elevates Christ as it gets to the end and says he's the source of eternal salvation. He's appointed to act on behalf of men before God. So the very similar role that Christ is playing as the high priest played, and it is a role where the activity of Christ, it counts, it's effective. His work works, and he is sinless, so that when he makes this, he doesn't need to make any atoning sacrifice for himself necessary to get him up to speed. He's sinless, so he's ready to go. The problem is the same, that is, sin makes a breach, and God mercifully says, hey, we got to get a fix to this. And the heart of the Father, see the heart of the Father behind this. He identifies the problem, which is sin, and then he says, I need to participate in choosing and offering Jesus, part of the Godhead, sort of offering myself in a certain sense. I need to step into this situation. I thought of the verse, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. So God is loving, and the motivation behind God to allow this in his son, which is what really struck me today. So God knew what was going to be required, and he went through with it. He offered it. It's so admirable. This is, the highest level of Trinity work that we can imagine, where the Father is offering himself, offering the Godhead, offering his Son, and the Father was able to not do this. So he was able to save Jesus from death. And it says the Father heard his prayers. He was able, and he heard, so he wasn't ignorant to this. He heard it says it in 4 different ways: Jesus' prayers, Jesus' supplication, Jesus' cries, and Jesus' tears. And yet God so loved that he allowed this to go forward. So you remember on the cross, Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Quotes Psalm 22. Read the rest of Psalm 22 if you want to be really, sobered up. And he cried out in a loud voice on the cross. And he says in the Garden of Gethsemane, my Father, if it is possible, which it is, let this, Father was able, but the sacrifice needed to be made to complete this. My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, Jesus says, I'm going to yield my will, not as I will, but as you will. That's from Matthew 26:39. It's in all the Gospels. And remember, Jesus is in the garden, falling on his face, crying out in a loud voice on the cross. Psalm 22 says it best. It says, he has not hidden his face from him. So he, the Father, has not hidden his face from him, Jesus, on the cross, but has heard when he cried to him. So the Father is up there hearing these pleas from Jesus, the tears, supplication, prayers, and cries of Jesus, and in a sense does not save him. Why? So he can save us. So the Father offers this sympathizing appointed Son, this great high priest without sin, and fixes this breach in the relationship between men and God, and receives this atoning, perfect, finished work, the only adequate sacrifice. And we get, the big thing is, verse 9, the source of eternal salvation is Jesus. He's the person and work of Jesus in doing this suffering, and the Father making this choice where the pleas of Jesus, they're not hidden, they're not absent, and he faces this. So it says about the Father, he has not hidden his face from Jesus. So the Father does a great work here as well and makes this eternal salvation source his own Son. What a sacrifice that the Father did. Thanks for listening.